Welcome to the Alphagenix Podcast, where every week we talk to incredible guests from around the world of biohacking, well-being, men's health, and more. Here's your host, co-founder of Alphagenix, Ross Tompkins.
Well, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our latest guests all the way from the other side of the world, Dr. Scott David and Jason Butcher. Jason, you're involved with all manner of different businesses in the health and wellbeing landscape. So I'm really excited to talk to you both today.
Absolutely, Ross. Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
I agree.
So I guess, where do we start? Let's start at the beginning. How did this collaboration between you both begin? Where did your love of healthcare and longevity come from?
Pretty sure it started with a long walk on the beach, right, Scott?
I don't know if we were holding hands.
Oh, take that back, Noah. I'll say, I mean, Scott's been a recognized doctor on the island for quite a long time. And one of my other partners in another business that I have on island has known Scott for a very long time. And we were looking at developing a spa facility and a longevity center in Cayman at one point. And just happened to be the opportunities came up and the people came together, and our other partner introduced us all together and just said, hey, this would be a really interesting fit. And like that mention of that walk on the beach type thing, it's really been sort of that for me anyways. We've just collaborated, started talking, getting together, and every single time we look at new ventures or ideas or ways to support the community, whether it's supporting the community within the dementia center space, or whether we look at kids with ADHD, or whether we're looking at the community that are really focused on longevity and anti-aging stuff. It's all come together really quite well. And we've just thankfully opened up our new facility, which where Scott's at right now. I see his sign is there behind him. So
yeah, just getting ready for the deluge.
Brilliant. So I guess you're never too far from a beach in Cayman.
Never.
Correct. If you blindfold yourself, a lot of times patients will come in saying they're stressed out and they can't, really relax. And I just say, well, if you blindfold yourself and walk, you're going to get into the water. So, and it is a beautiful beach, most of the areas of the island. So it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. So where did your love of medicine come from then, Scott?
Me, well, medicine. So I'm double boarded. I'm in emergency medicine and trauma, and I've done that for 27 years throughout the United States in different, large hospitals, little hospitals. And then about 14 years ago, I got board certified through the American Board of Anti-Aging and Regenerative Medicine. And I guess the trauma part of it, years and years and years ago, I was literally on a beach, and some guy fell off an old-fashioned jet ski and smashed his head, and I jumped in and wrapped my T-shirt around him, and the paramedic told me I saved his life. I thought that was cool, and there we go. And then about 14 years ago, it was kind of a strange thing. So after emergency medicine, I guess like 14 years ago, I suffered a brain aneurysm. Long story short, I felt amazing that I was cured, and the guys in Philadelphia fixed me up. But shortly thereafter, I felt horrible. I should have been, feeling great. Went doctor to doctor. Nobody could figure it out. Went to a doctor that finally got a growth hormone level and a testosterone level. And because a little bit of a pituitary squeeze from the aneurysm bleed, my numbers were terrible. And I started testosterone replacement, intermittent growth hormone. And within 3 weeks, I was like, better than I was before all of this had happened. So I was shocked. And most of my colleagues at the time thought it was complete witchcraft and said, this is, nuts. And then I went to the American, the A4M, the American Anti-Aging Foundation there. And it was interesting because I kind of thought it was going to be what my colleagues thought, these guys that were washed up and really had no careers, but yet alone the keynote speaker, I can remember the first time I went, was talking about, and this is 12 years ago, the effect of NAD in the Krebs cycle, which is like Krebs cycles, when we're in medical school, is something we're studying that just brings pain to everybody. But he was talking about NAD more than a decade ago. So it's that's kind of where I go. And then I have a personal aspect in it, as well as just an enjoyment of working with people after being in the emergency room for as many years as I have, and dealing with people at generally their worst. It's nice to actually work with clients that really want to make them their best, and it's kind of fun.
Yeah, you get someone to be the very best version of themselves. It was it's interesting you mentioned growth hormone, because that's something that's not easily accessible here in the UK. If you do a test for IGF-1, you have to be 2 standard deviations below the mean for your age. But it's not something that a lot of doctors will even entertain. I think they're not happy to perhaps put their name or their license on the line. Is it common practice where you are?
I wouldn't say it's common, and the reality is adult growth hormone deficiency, which was basically the really only indication to kind of give growth hormone without using the art of medicine. A doctor can prescribe anything he or she wants based on just their studies and their feeling. But with growth hormone, most doctors would want to have some sort of comfort level, and they use adult growth hormone deficiency. With IGF-1, the magic number is 95, depending upon how your measures are in the UK versus the US. Excuse me. And classically, if you look at the data from the lab data, they say, if you're below 95, you're deficient, period. There's no argument. Now, years and years ago, there used to be all kinds of tests that you had to do to stimulate the pituitary to spit out some growth hormone and things like that. But the medication that we used to use to do those tests basically had a very high risk of stroke. And so you had to tell the patient, we might find out you're growth hormone deficient, but there's a good chance you're going to get a stroke. And then they stop making. The medication doesn't exist on Earth anymore. So you really have to go clinical. And, traumatic brain injury, things like that, there's no doubt that there's issues there. And I think that's one of the things to really jump on. Now we were talking peptides earlier. There are some good growth hormone releasing peptides. And I was late to the game because I just didn't really feel like it was really something that would make sense. But the reality is there's, tesamorelin and ipamorelin and sermorelin and CJC. These are all peptides that do a pretty good job of releasing sporadic, and I do it in a cyclic fashion, growth hormone, because growth hormone, just like testosterone, if you do take it for a long time, it basically will deplete your ability to produce growth hormone. So my biggest reason for doing it is probably 2. I've had probably in my little practice, probably 50 patients that went in for some sort of orthopedic surgery, spinal, shoulder. Their recovery, if I did a month of growth hormone pre-surgery and then 2 months post-surgery while they're going through rehab, was amazing. And I always, it wasn't my decision, but the patients typically double blind, or at least singly blind, the orthopedist, and their responses are, I don't know, you must be Superman. You're healing so fast. This is amazing. And the other thing, which is really quite interesting, is there are some great studies out there that show, dementia is something that can be not necessarily treated, but possibly delayed or enhanced by using growth hormone or a peptide to increase growth hormone release. And it's pretty fascinating that way. So it is accessible, and it's in the United States. It's state to state. For example, I live on the East Coast, and New Jersey, you can typically prescribe growth hormone, but you go over the bridge, and New York, they get a little nuts about it. So it's kind of interesting. But I'm kind of an old school doctor in a young school body, I guess. And I kind of don't think the government has a real say in what we should be doing, as long as we're not doing harm.
Yeah, that's the big thing, isn't it? I came across growth hormone for the first time about probably about 3 years ago, and I had stem cells injected in my shoulder in Mexico. And I said, "Is there anything else we can do, to speed things up?" And the guy was like, "Yeah, I'll give you 3 months of growth hormone." And I felt amazing, absolutely amazing. Sped through the recovery afterwards.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my introduction to it then.
Yeah.
So with the gentleman or the patients that you have now, is it something that you do in a cycle? Is it 5 days on, 2 days off, or is it 3 months on, 6 months off? How does it work?
Yeah. So it's interesting. If you would have asked me like 10 years ago about growth hormone, I would have said, if you can afford it, stay on it forever. And there's studies with IGF-1 on both sides of the fence. Is it something that enhances cancer, or is it something that enhances apoptosis and kills cancer? And there's kind of like both sides of the fence. I mean, humans with the highest level of growth hormone are kids, and they have the lowest, incidence of cancer. So you say, well, I don't know, is it, what's there? Is it causal, or is it just correlative? But today, it's actually weird because the price of, at least in the United States, the price of growth hormone actually dropped a lot. It used to be, significant per month, and it's actually dropped, which is weird. But most practitioners are doing like a 5-day, Monday through Friday. Most suggest in the late evening because growth hormone, you get a spike, at night when you're sleeping. And again, with the growth hormone releasing peptides, I do that as well, 5 on, 2 off. And there's no real good data out there, but I think most of us are doing 3 months on, 6 weeks off, just to clean out the receptors, But again, it's really, really, I kind of leave it to the patients that are either having neurocognitive, mild cognitive impairment issues, or surgical issues that we have a long discussion with. I just wouldn't take it just to get ripped and get cut up in the gym. I think that's a mistake, especially if you're just going to buy it online somewhere, because there's so many other things that you really have to pay attention to. It can be the cherry on the cake in the sense that if you're really maximized everything, your sleep, your numbers, your diet, your exercise regimen, all right, then we could talk about it. But it's not something that I take very lightly.
Yeah, that was interesting what you mentioned there. So do you take a very holistic view of the patient? Are you talking to them about their diet, about their sleep, about maybe their mental health practices as well?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, most people in the business have given a couple of dollars to Peter Attia with his book, and he came out with a nice format of things that I've been doing for a number of years. I like the way he expressed a lot of what he suggested, and I believe that all the things that we just mentioned: diet, exercise, sleep, mental health, behavioral health. These are all part and parcel of the whole program. That being said, I am a bit of a realist. It's one thing to say, all right, let's really push for that 8 hours of sleep. Well, some guys, especially the high performance guys, and a guy like Jason, who's on phone calls constantly and meetings constantly, if you're not in bed for the 8 hours, you're not getting 8 hours of sleep. So if you're really running a bunch of businesses and you're very, very active, it's hard to truly say to get there. So I think you have to kind of, you can't be very paternal and say, you must get this much sleep, because you got to be realistic sometimes. I do think it's important if somebody's a clean slate and they're like, listen, what do I need to do to have a great health span? Sure. I think it's very, very important. And I in New York, in the United States, there's a commercial. A guy calls himself the Hair Club for Men. And he says, not only am I a member, but I'm the president of the company. And that's how I've kind of, treat this stuff as well. I mean, I've been on hormone therapy for 14 years, and I've been vegan for 17 years. If I could live in the gym, I do. And I don't know, I think it paid off. I mean, I'm going to be 74, right, Jason? Almost.
Brilliant. So if someone comes in to see you then and they say, I've been recommended to come and see you, I want to live to 120, where do you start? What's the beginning of that consultation? Is there, I'm presuming there's not like a cookie cutter solution here. So you say, right, I'm going to give you an IV NAD once a week. I'm going to do this, and this. It's presumably quite personalized.
Right. Yeah, it is. I think usually when guys or women come in and they say something like that because they've just read, somebody Sinclair's book or Tia's book, and they say, all right, I want to live till I'm 120. My usually tongue-in-cheek answer is, well, why? For what? and sort of get into their head that way. But I don't, again, being a New Yorker, I'm kind of cynical, and my answer usually is well, if somebody's selling you, I'm going to get you to 120. It sounds good until you get hit by a bus. It's kind of like Mike. Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. So the reality is I kind of on the health span, which is, if I can give you every day feeling healthy and get you to drop dead 15 minutes before your funeral, that was a good deal. And not suffer towards the end of life and waste all this money and be contracted in a nursing home or something like that. So that's kind of like the goal that I like to do, but it is very individualized. And a lot of it is finding out what their true goal is. Is it to get rid of pain? I have a number of years of actually chronic pain management that I've done as well. And so is it a pain issue? Is it a weight issue? Is it cognitive ability? A lot of patients in the generation today of say 40 to 55, I find a lot of men and women are very interested in the feeling good every day, being as functional as I can every day, as well as maintaining cognition. I think that's something that, we do here. I like to do some neurocognitive testing, which, I test verbal memory, visual memory, executive function, overall neurocognitive abilities, as well as doing screenings for anxiety and depression. And I do an Epworth sleep study, a sleep questionnaire to tell me how they think they're sleeping anyway. And then from there, we take a deep dive. It's one thing to say, if somebody comes to me and say, listen, I'm training 5 days a week, I'm watching my macros, I'm doing this. Okay, that's good, because that's kind of like a well-trained thoroughbred that now you just got to really train up a little bit. But if somebody comes in and they smell like scotch from the night before, and they basically said, yeah, I religiously drive by a gym at least once a day, I don't even start talking NAD, rapamycin. I mean, we're talking, eons away. Right? So it's really very individualized. And I can take care of those people as well. Guys that walk in and are 75 pounds overweight, and I explain to them, what's going to happen. And when they get not only type 2 diabetes, but they're going to get what we call type 3 diabetes, which is dementia. How we, are you interested? What do you want to do? And really, that's the key. But if you get here on island, we have a lot of very, very motivated people. They're very active. I mean, very, very youthful, active, but there's also a lot of guys that are high net worth, supercharged attorneys and accountants that are putting in their 18 hours and really not taking care of themselves. So I'm kind of open to, any challenge.
Yeah. Whatever comes in, you've got a way to help them. And how old do you want to be?
Well, I guess it's how things are going at home with the wife. Some days I look at my watch and go, I'm good. No, but the reality is it's mentation. I mean, I think for me, of course, feeling good physically is very, very important to me. But shortly after having that aneurysm, there was a 2-week period where I call it dementia. The neurosurgeon says otherwise, but I was out of it, man. I couldn't remember anything, and that was miserable. And I kind of have a real place in my heart for people that have dementia. There are some things you could do to, in my opinion, to aggressively prevent if it's diagnosed early enough. And then in the early phases, possibly do some things as well. I had a gentleman recently come in who, he saw his primary doctor, saw a neurologist, and this guy's sharp as a pistol. He owns 50 rental properties, and, he's reaching 80. But he says, I can't tell you what I had for breakfast, and he sees it happening, which is to me one of the most scary and sad things to to deal with.
Yeah.
But he went to his doctor, and the doctor said, let's get a neurologist involved. The neurologist put him on a low-dose Aricept, and they said, off with you, lad. And so he came to me. His hemoglobin A1C is 7.2. And I'm like, well, your sugar's a bit high, isn't it? And he goes, yeah, I'm on metformin twice a day. I'm like, okay. And what about exercise? And he's actually on testosterone therapy, and he actually is fairly active. But this is somebody that we had a long discussion, and there was a great study recently about hyperbaric oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
They took a series of patients and they put them into a tank every day for 30 days, and the results were amazing. So I talked to him about that, and we're going to do that. And I also said, I don't see any downside to trying 3 to 6 months of growth hormone, and because there's been great studies that show neuronal growth with growth hormone. So if we're going to hit him with hyperbaric oxygen and go after his sugar, I'd love to get him down in the 5s. One way or another, diet or increase his protein intake. I think that's kind of a thing. So it's those little things, thinking out of the box. And he's actually a scientist, and it's actually kind of interesting. What he's done is he uses topical testosterone, but he uses, and I don't, for legal reasons, I'm not saying to do this, but he uses DMSO, which basically is a transfer agent. And back in the days, they used to do that for arthritis. You'd put it on your elbow and you would use it as a transfer agent. And it's amazing the numbers you get. But the DMSO does come with some heavy concerns as well. But this guy is motivated to see if he can improve his health span. So, my thinking is I don't look really at the number, but I'll take anything they give us. But the big thing is I don't want to be, falling down on my walker, walking to the pickleball court,
Yeah. What about you, Jason? Are you aiming for 250?
Well, Ross, I know, as Scott mentioned earlier, the hair men for hair club for men. I personally was actually diagnosed with dementia when I was 40. So I had a number of treatments when I was, for the first few years I was diagnosed with it. And it included hyperbaric chamber therapy, oxygen therapy. It included things like PEMF and bioresonance, which, from my standpoint, the neurologist had suggested I take some various medicines and stuff. And I just didn't believe in that. I didn't want to be taking prescription drugs at the time. And from my feeling, it was a decision that my wife at the time and I decided to not. And luckily, she was actually an expert in PEMF and bioresonance. So we treated me with that. And that was 9 years ago. Wow. So for the most part, I faced the fact that, I just can't always remember everything. And there are certain elements. But for the most part, at the time, I couldn't remember where I was driving home. It was certain things where I was driving, where I was going, or what I was doing, and sometimes making decisions that I probably shouldn't have been necessarily be making. And although Scott probably doesn't want to mention anything now, I am, testing now because I have found that this past little while that I've sort of noticed it as well. So, part of Scott's program is supporting with testing, and we're also doing bioresonance again and really testing and validating around where things may be a little bit challenged. So I think, from my standpoint, I've just done an oxygen therapy program with somebody who has a tank on island, who's very supportive around alternative, creative ways of healing and reducing inflammation, which, in all my research and studies that I had done as a person with dementia, I studied a number of different illnesses like Lyme's disease and other things. And it all kept coming down to that element of inflammation and issues such as sugars and so I really changed my lifestyle. I quit drinking, changed my lifestyle as far as what I was eating. I went to raw food. I did a lot of different things at the time that maybe I'm not doing today. But I think with the combination of what Scott is doing from blood and neuro testing, as well as the biofeedback and bioresonance stuff that we're getting, I myself am finding these things really helpful in having more clarity on a daily basis, and really I've just restarted this regime, and it really is helping tremendously. So
what about the nootropics, like is it piracetam? And some
For
of
the
that,
use
like,
of like
right.
mild cognitive impairment and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I don't think
I
I
mean,
said that right. You know what I mean?
yeah, no, I mean, so the whole category of nootropics is, it kind of goes along with the peptides, right? I mean, it's these pharmaceutical agents that have maybe went through FDA trials 1 and 2, which makes them at least not poisonous to humans, but we don't really know what it does. The gold standard nootropic is Adderall, and you know, the one that I use probably on a 20-to-1 ratio. I don't use a lot of Adderall for multiple different reasons, but I like modafinil, Provigil, and some guys, some patients absolutely love it. I like it because it doesn't really disrupt your sleep architecture, meaning you can literally take it at night and you'll go to sleep. The thing is if the alarm hits at 4:30, you're up and you're ready. And a lot of in the States, a lot of firemen and nighttime workers, ER doctors, paramedics, and so forth. And even I think some Air Force pilots take it. And it's interesting because in France, at least it used to be, I'm not sure if it's still the case, they consider it to be a sports enhancing drug. So if you're on modafinil, you can't participate in something that's in the country. You know, I think that it does enhance a lot of thought. It definitely works. It works along the dopamine channel, which is interesting because initially they were testing modafinil to do oral detox from cocaine because it's such a strong dopamine agent. And so I use that, not like water, but I use that. As far as doing the other nootropics, again, it's the same thing as a peptide. If there's something that I know is gonna work, like a lot of my shtick with peptides is, you know, if I use A, B, or C, it should do this, it could do this, it would do this, it might do this. If I give you 100 milligrams of morphine, it's going to do this. So there's no question, you know. So the same thing with the nootropics. There are some good ones out there. You know, a lot of them have super high dose caffeine, super high dose B12. So I'm not quite sure if it's, you know, them on their own. But prescriptively, modafinil is something that I use. It's the absolute least addictive medication ever created. The studies are impressive. And so again, I try to go. I'm a very open-minded, clinically based physician. I won't be the first guy to use a drug. I won't be the last guy to give it up. But I'd like to see studies on things because, you know, you could come up with a bunch of different things. But, you know, I guess part of my longevity, and we were talking about the longevity practices. And again, if I break it down, it's probably, 25%, 25%, 4 quarters. One is hormone therapy, typical TRT and thyroid and whatever else your typical hormone optimization would be. 25% would be external. You know, I like the aesthetics. I like Botox and fillers and fun stuff like that. And then 25% is really old school, getting to know the patient and kind of, you know, making him or her know that I'm with them. You know, we're a team and we're going to get either through a problem or we're going to have a lot of self-discovery to be better and make things happen. And then the last 25% is I do a lot of preventative testing that is completely not paid for by insurance because they don't really want you to be healthy. They want you to live long enough that they break their margins for profit. But things like there's a liquid biopsy that they call it now. It's a Galleri test. It's GALLERI, and it tests for acellular methylated DNA, which is kind of like, then they can use, I think, an AI source to pull out if you have, not genetically, but if you actually have 50 different types of cancer. And I was at a lecture where one of the chief medical scientists threw out a number and said that if he was able to give this test to every single person in the United States, once a year in 18 months, they would crush the treatment of cancer by like 40%. I mean, they would absolutely make monstrous leaps and bounds. And it's not expensive today. It's like $900 US, but a lot of doctors still aren't doing it. A lot of doctors never heard of it, you know. And there's another, and I don't own any of these things. There's, you know, companies that I kind of think do a good job. There's another test in the United States and Canada called Prenovo, and that's a head-to-toe MRI screening. And that, you know, again, they do a good job. It's a great user experience, but it's kind of interesting if you get somebody that's not a you know, necessarily a worrywart, but just somebody who says, you know, I don't know, my father had, you know, a pancreatic issue and my mother had this issue. You get a test from your head to your knees, basically, and it's a screening MRI. So in a test of one, you can't beat it. Instead of doing nothing, it's 100% better. And my belief is if we can find things early and attack them and address them, it's worth it. And like Jason said, we do an online neurocognitive test, which is amazing. I mean, I can pull up mild cognitive impairment way before we start talking about senior moments and things like that. And then, you know, and then some of the genetic testing, the APO testing, the APOE, which is an interesting little marker for you know, the likelihood of you having early dementia versus later onset of dementia. But the big thing is, again, it's and my answer to a lot of that is, well, now what? You know, what are you going to do now? So we now know this and say, okay, well, what's out there? And unfortunately, there is no treatment that really works for dementia. So now you got to go out of the box. And most of the patients at that point are like, let's try something as long as it's not going to bother me. And that's why you get things like rapamycin. You know, the studies on rapamycin are really exciting. It's been around for 40 years or so. And I personally, I've been sort of, you know, popping up studies over the last 3 years, just looking. And it always had this baggage of being this immunomodulator and being so dangerous because of basically just the patients with organ transplantation. But, you know, it wasn't just rapamycin. They'd be on cyclosporin and prednisone and all these other ones. And they are poisons. They shut your immune system down. So rapamycin, it was always this kind of quirky thing. And guys that are far smarter than me and double PhDs and things like that, they work that stuff out. But the interesting thing was there's a Dr. Green who's in New York City, and he gave a podcast lecture, and I was really taken back that his cognitive ability was so much sharper than me. He was pulling out studies, and he said, somebody asked him the question, like, what's the downside to this? And his response, I thought, was classic. He said, the only problem with taking this drug, he started when he was 70, and he's like 81, 82 now. And he says the only downside to taking this drug at low dose under monitored circumstances with a doctor that's got experience in it is I should have done it when I was 50, but I started when I was 70. And he says he had some sort of cardiomyopathy. He was like, you know, basically with a walker, very limited. And he said my life expectancy was probably, 18 months. And now he's an avid walker. He's sharp as a tack. And he has a practice in New York City, and that's all he does is just evaluate patients for rapamycin use. So so I think it's a very good detailed conversation to have with a doctor that has experience. And I personally drank the Kool-Aid. I started it about 12 weeks ago, and I don't know. I'm growth hormone, rapamycin. I don't know if I'm getting any smarter. I'm not getting any taller, so I'm not quite sure what it's doing.
So is the main thing with rapamycin cognitive enhancement?
Well, it's supposed to take care of the big four demons. It's supposed to really enhance, cardiac disease in different ways. It's definitely a dementia issue. Again, going back to what Jason said, it's the uber anti-inflammatory in a sense, because you're knocking out, mTOR1. And so it works that way. So, but it is supposed to have effects on diabetes, heart disease, dementia, and it is considered to be a chemotherapeutic agent for a handful of cancers. So when I look at it as a drug that's usually like once or twice a day versus low dose once a week, the safety profile is there. But again, it's not something that I would buy online. You can buy anything online without really knowing your underlying history. Again, I think you really need a doctor that has an idea of what's going on with you to put it together.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to leave a note for one of my kids to get in touch with you in 100 years to do another podcast. We'll all be long gone.
I still be any taller, by the way.
No, I definitely will not be any taller. But
you said something really interesting earlier, which was the gentleman that came in who had been diagnosed with dementia, and you said there's no harm doing a course of growth hormone with you because we might get neuroplasticity, some new neuronal growth.
Sure.
Which kind of leads me on to how does plant medicine fit into this with psilocybin? Because obviously that can cause neurogenesis as well. But now we're definitely not in the realms of everyday pharmaceuticals. And Jason, I know you have an interest in this as well. Is that something that comes up in conversation? Is it something that's very separate? How does it fit?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason. Just you jump in.
Yeah, I mean, it's from my standpoint, it's not something that we prescribe or provide necessarily within our clinic and our access for them from a medical standpoint. However, Russ, as you know, I have a retreat center in Jamaica that is a psilocybin facility. And we ourselves have had many people who have had mental health challenges and other things come, and when they leave, they just sort of change people. And I can't say that from a clinical standpoint or a research standpoint, except that it's being shown over and over and over again with licensing and regulations and things changing federally across the United States and other markets around the world that psilocybin is being open, as well as other things like MDMA and other products. What I know and believe in is that psilocybin has supported helping many people that have come to our facilities, as well as many people who have gone to other facilities. I also strongly believe in products like Ibogaine that I've seen firsthand, people who have been heroin addicts, opioid addicts, drug addicts, sex addicts even. The Ibogaine experience has changed their lives. And I refer people to facilities that I believe in, that are run by doctors and organizations that are, very stand up and follow specific protocols, and they have nurses and they have support people. And I believe that, groups like Beyond in Mexico, they provide a service that when your family member is committing suicide, or they are trying to, or they're so overdosed in drugs, and no doctors, and no right or wrong, but doctors have not had the right information. Like Dr. Scott David said, they only know what they know, right? And maybe they don't know about a specific product or a specific protocol, so they put them on a certain drug that really doesn't help them, right? The experience that I've had firsthand is heroin addicts have gone to Beyond. I've been there. I've witnessed them come in completely wired and out of their gall, and after one session, a week later, you're friends with them, you're hanging out with them, you're having conversations with them, where initially when they came in, you couldn't have a 2-word sentence with them. And there's no denying, if you want to look at research or studies and everything else, the group and Beyond, the doctor there has treated 25,000 people, with Ibogaine, and with, I think their rate is around 75% success rate. I don't know that what any other product or protocol or systems can demonstrate that. And I know obviously there's treatments for cancers and other things that have good success rates, but do they have that success rate with, drug addicts? And we know that the opioid issues in the States are absolutely staggering. And we even have this circumstance in Cayman right now, where we're starting to see opioid issues and drug addict issues and other things. And I don't prescribe it, but I do definitely recommend people look at it, their families look at it, and provide an opportunity for people to experience it. I myself experienced almost everything that's available out in that space, and I strongly believe in Ibogaine as a solution. and of course psilocybin as well in a different realm. But it's something that I support myself, and obviously support other people to explore that if they find that they're just not being supported, or they're getting or not getting results by other solutions.
I guess when you think about it logically, 70% or whatever it is of modern medicine is still synthesized from plants. It's a really high percentage, isn't it? So it's not a huge leap to think that these natural plants in their original state can have profound effects.
Yeah, I think if and as far as like the neurocognitive aspects of it, again, there's a lot of studies going on with psilocybin, ibogaine, and the whole space. And the problem with neuroplasticity is nerves generally grow at about 1 millimeter a year, so it's kind of a hard thing to study. Axonal growth with growth hormone has been well documented, so that's what I sort of stand on in that sense. But again, not alone. I mean, I think you need, hyperbaric oxygen has been shown to increase stem cell migration by 800%. So, it's all of these different aspects in a way of putting it together. And again, it boils back for me as a clinician to say, well, I need to get that neurocognitive test because I need to know what the number is on a piece of paper that I can say, okay, well, you were at 70% of whatever we're measuring. Now you're at 80% of whatever we're measuring. So I think that's kind of an interesting facet of it. I mean, if you've ever seen some of the work that Paul Stamets is doing, I mean, he's the mushroom guy, and the movie that he was involved with, Fantastic Fungi, that was amazing. I use personally 3 of his products. Just because I think they're amazing. He has this immuno booster myco community. It's a tincture, and I could say that I took it straight out for 3 months, felt amazing after 6 weeks, took a break, and you could feel yourself just go down and knock out. There are some studies that say if you enhance, your diet with 3 or 4 meals of 75% or more of just random mushrooms, not psilocybin and stuff, but your turkey tails and your lion's mane and chaga and so forth, that they've done a study that there's a decrease in dementia as well. So it's kind of interesting from that space. So yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to my thinking is we don't know enough. Big pharma owns a lot of the insurance companies, which basically decide what tests you can get. So I think that if you want to take control of your own health and life, I can have a duty to act in a sense to try to help you out and help you get through some of these studies. And some of the today, I mean, with our technology, I mean, patients come in very, very educated, at least in my space, and I love getting challenged. A lot of the old docs are like, "Well, I'm the doctor, you're the patient." I don't buy that nonsense. So I think it is nicer to work on a team approach, but there are a lot of things out there. I mean, we're gonna head out to the Anti-Aging World Conference in Vegas in December, and they have like 1,000 vendors, and it's amazing the stuff. There's everything from guys selling Band-Aids to strobe, red light strobe therapy in a spinning chair. It's just like, what the hell? So somewhere in the middle is going to be a nice aspect of what's there. But it is a fascinating field to be in.
Ross, I will also be at the Wonderland Conference in Miami in November, which is longevity and psychedelics. So I'm sure that we'll explore and express a little bit more and even have more information. So always have a follow-up as well.
Yeah, I'm writing these things down as well. I've not come across those. You raised a really interesting point there about technology, because we talked about longevity medicine, we talked about sort of the natural psilocybin type approach as well, and more now people are getting really into the technology side of it as well. They've got Whoop straps and aura rings and everything attached up all over the place. Okay, well, that obviously that answers the question. Perhaps how much emphasis do you put onto this? Because I've met people before. I climbed a mountain in Argentina last year, Aconcagua. So it's 7,000 meters. We were walking up, and I would turn around and say, "How are you feeling?" to someone, and they would go, "Oh, let me tell you, I'm feeling okay because my heart rate is such and such, and my heart rate variability is such and such." And I was like, no, how are you feeling? Like, can we go too far, I guess is my point here. Should we really be listening to the patient more rather than just relying on metrics?
Yeah, I mean, as like I said, I'm wearing an Aura ring right now, and I think Sinclair sort of coined the phrase, if you don't measure it, you really can't speak about it. I don't think you should be looking at data saying, "Oh, wait a minute, no, I feel anxious." And it's not. No, that's kind of nonsensical. But what's cool is like with me, doing different night shifts in the ER, and I've worked these 24-hour shifts and things. And the next morning, my wife will say, "Well, how you feeling? You're off today. How you feeling?" And I kind of say, "Oh, all right, I feel okay." And that's where sort of mental strength comes along. But then if I do look at the data, I check my phone and be like, "Oh yeah, well, I know I took a bunch of cat naps, and I was actually physically in a recumbent position for 6 hours, but yeah, I only got 2 hours of sleep. So I guess I don't feel good, and I probably should respect that a little bit, drop down and get some rest." So I think there's a balance.
Well, I think it's, as I was saying earlier, the element of doctors only know what they know, right? Is some doctors like I've managed with the openness to explore, even more recently, where the introduction to Scotty, even though he's heard about things like bioresonance and biofeedback and PMF, just the openness of a doctor to be able to say, "Hey, actually, you know what? I see the benefit of being able to apply the information that I get back from these tools and resources," is very different than the majority of doctors that you're gonna see, right? So I think that's where it's not necessarily just the doctors or the area or the market. I think it's the doctor and finding that special person, right? Like what you were asking earlier about how are you feeling, on a day-to-day basis. I was a high-functioning entrepreneur with way too many things going on and sleeping 2-3 hours a night. And like a surgeon who's doing that every day, I would just say, "Hey, I'm good. I think I'm good. I think I'm good." But then lethargic. I thought being lethargic was normal. So I thought I was okay. Even the last while where I was like, "Hey, every day is fine," but I'm waking up more exhausted than I was before. And, I go for a treatment of hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and I'm waking up refreshed in the morning. Wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, just all of a sudden I'm awake and I'm refreshed and I'm like ready to go raring, where that hasn't happened for quite a long time. So you think, well, how was I asked? If I was asked how am I feeling the week before, I feel fine. I'm okay. But, after your treatment, it's something now, something different. It's like how I suggest people experience our treatments that we do in Jamaica with mycelia and the psilocybin. Afterwards, you have had a completely different experience and you're feeling different. It's not the experience of what you're feeling during the experience, but it's how you're feeling afterwards and what you've experienced, how your thought processes are happening and how you're seeing things. They're different. You people come out and they say, I see things differently. They're clearer. They're in different. I'm seeing differently what it is that I'm looking at. And those are areas which is what I find most interesting, because when somebody says, "How are you?" the common answer is, "I'm okay. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm fine.
I'm fine." And, there are programs out there like Are You Okay in Australia, who is very much around mental health and focused around people who are committing suicide and things. And the whole element of asking, "Are you okay?" is to actually spark real conversation, as in people are not truly speaking and or even truly asking if you are okay. So I think those are all interesting areas. Mental health, of course, I think we've all been dealing with it for a long time, but I think after things like COVID, we've seen a tremendous growth and expansion in that space. And what is the response? I'm okay, but are they really? One of our apps that we launched called Ciento, it's for the first responder industry. Police, fire, emergency services are dealing with massive trauma and issues and regular things on a regular basis. And when they're asked, are they okay? They're okay, but they're not talking about it. They're not communicating about what's actually happening in their lives. It's the largest worker base of people committing suicide in North America. And what are they? They're on drugs. They're on alcohol abuse. They're on the suppressants and things. Not to say anything wrong with doctors trying to help them, but they're not really dealing with their actual traumas. And I think people are starting to see that communication, being able to share, being able to talk about it is really, really critical. But also exploring other avenues to release some of that trauma without necessarily having to take a drug or a product to maybe bury their feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got Scott back as well.
Yeah, hello. We lost you for a little bit there, Scott.
I know. I saw.
I had just to finish off what you were saying there a moment ago. I had a Whoop strap for a little while, and I fell for the marketing. I was like, yeah, absolutely, it's going to change my life. Historically, I've slept 7.5 hours. Kind of, that's just me. Has been for a very long time. The Whoop strap didn't seem to like that. And every day I would wake up feeling fine, hop out of bed, sort of 5:30 every day, and my Whoop strap would say 40%. Don't do anything today. Damn, I bought a dodgy Whoop strap. I think I've got a broken one, so I gave it to my wife 100% every day. So maybe it must be broken. We'll give it to our son 100%. I was like, yeah, this is rubbish. Throw it away.
Yeah, I mean, I think getting some of the data is good. It's just a matter of what you do with it. And there was a study not too long ago. It was a big study that basically showed patients that were a little bit critical and trying to get their sugar to be, uber optimal actually did worse long term. So I think that, I think before the signal dropped out, we were talking about, things like the continuous glucose monitor. And that's kind of what I like to use that for is a little bit of an eye opening to let the patient see the effect of diet. But you can like for me, classically 3:00, my standard snack was a banana, a couple of tablespoons of peanut butter, and a black coffee. That was my 3:00, deal. And so I get this glucose monitor, and it turns out that bananas are like liquid, not liquid poison, but poison to me. My sugar spikes up like crazy, and it lasts for a long time. So I kind of don't eat, bananas very much anymore. And then I did the same thing with carbs. I said, all right, let's see pasta versus bread versus potatoes versus rice. And I would have bet that, pasta was the poison, even though I'll eat it 3 times a day if you give me the chance. And then bread, then rice, and I was thinking potatoes probably are easy. I can live on those, right? But the reality is in my biome, in my body, potatoes were the worst. I mean, they turned into liquid sugar for me, and I was like above like 180 for hours. So I tweaked it. I go to more of a wild rice and grain versus anything else. And it's I think it's, again, having that data is kind of interesting, because a lot of patients, and again, I'm along the lines of some of the bigger thought leaders in a sense. I don't like the term pre-diabetes. I think it's a complete marketing ploy from big pharma. So to me, you're either you're doing great, or guess what? In a couple of years, you're going to be a diabetic. So here we're not at the fork in the road, but we're getting close. What can we do? So doing continuous glucose monitoring in those people where you can see that they spike is really very beneficial from a clinician standpoint, because you can actually show them. And again, a lot of doctors won't give it to you. Why? Well, insurance companies, it's $75 most of the places for 2 weeks. I mean, the reality is don't have a latte for a couple of days and you're good. So, I don't like insurance companies telling us what we can and cannot do. Because at the end of the day, you don't do that with any other part of your life. And then if your health is the most important part, what are you going to let, some bureaucrat or some guy sitting in the tower telling you what you can and cannot do? And it's unfortunate.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I switched to putting some honey in my coffee a couple of years ago because I was like, processed sugar is evil. It's going to kill me. I'll have honey in my coffee. And then I wore one of the continuous glucose monitors, and honey shot it right out like to space. It went so high, stayed high. And then I was like, I wonder what sugar does. And I put a little bit of sugar in my tea, and it hardly did anything at all. I was like, oh, okay, so maybe I've been not doing the right thing by myself by thinking I was using this natural form, organic honey instead. So it's super interesting.
Yeah. And again, you can, that's where some of the dietary body hacking can come out. You can really have the data in front of you. You can figure out what's going on. There was a test for a while there called Day 2. And I used it for a lot of patients, and it was a great product, but I guess they weren't making any money, and they went to a more corporate structure. So they go to big companies like Home Depot and Walmart, and that's a value added, but it was basically a biome test that they used like artificial intelligence to say, okay, well, you have 22% E. coli and 17% Bacteroides and blah, blah, blah. And then they broke it down to what you probably could or could not eat. And it was fascinating. It was like, you could, if you eat, for me, it was like, I couldn't eat quinoa on its own, which I thought was kind of interesting. But if I ate it with avocados, it'd be awesome. So it was kind of like an interesting thing, but those tests do exist. I mean, they're out there. Okay. So it's kind of a cool thing. It's just a matter of finding. But again, it's a matter of how deep it goes back to what I first said. You want to live to 120, or why? I mean, what is your reasoning? And that's the thing. It's like, well, what are you willing? What are you willing to do to get there? Are you willing to, really change your diet, or we're just, wasting time? And even somebody who just wants to feel good but doesn't want to give up, say, their bad diet, which might not be as bad as we think. What can we do to offset some of that stuff and make some sense to it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been absolutely fascinating chatting to you. Like, Alphagenix, we specialize in hormone optimization, but you guys have gone to a totally different level over there in the Cayman. So it's been fascinating. Loved every minute chatting to you. Anyone who's watching this, how do they reach out to you? Is it a website, Instagram? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Probably just microdose psilocybin, and we meet on the same frontier. And then, just say, hey, man, what's up?
Energetic.
For right now, the easiest way is probably I have a landing page, and it takes us to all these other places, but drscottdavid.com. It's easy to remember. And then that'll bring you to Grand Harbor Medical, and then we can get some information for you.
Wonderful. And Jason, best way to get hold of you?
Ross, the best way is through LinkedIn. Honestly, Jason Butcher under LinkedIn. Of course, through the various programs that I'm involved with, Ciento.io or myciliajm.com or grandharbormedical.com, which is our project that is in Cayman. There's a number of different ways, but the best way to reach me directly is under LinkedIn, under my name.
Wonderful. Well, we'll make sure all the links are on this when it goes out, and it'll probably go out tomorrow. One final question to ask you. If you could live forever, would you? If you could be immortal, would you opt for it?
As long as I could have my family with me. Mm-hmm. By myself, I don't know. Maybe it's, I don't want to lose the people. We have an ongoing joke. Who's going to go first? Me and my wife, and some days it's going to be her, but I'm always praying it's me. Living forever without my family is just not important to me.
Yeah.
And Ross, I have a little bit of a different opinion. I think from an energetically standpoint, I think that we all live forever. In the realm of our bodies, we may not see this physical body, but I believe in the elements of the studies from shamanism and the programs that I've studied for many, many years, where the energies of our families continue down through us, and generation past generation, and our DNAs that we carry are generational. So memories, the energy within us continue, and those things continue through our generations that we continue to pass down too. So, ultimately it may not be our consciousness that's today that's living. And I don't know that I could live forever in this consciousness, especially with what I see happening in the world today. But I do believe our energies live forever. So,
what an absolutely amazing answer. I love that. Great. Well, on that note, it's been an absolute pleasure, gentlemen. I shall leave you to the rest of your day, and we'll speak soon. Take care.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Alphagenix Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss next week's episode. For more resources on Alphagenix and men's health, visit alphagenix.co.uk. Until next time.